So I think we're just about to start, aren't we? Welcome those who are starting to join us. We'll leave it a few minutes for everyone to get in.
Una, you can see the participant numbers creeping up at the bottom if you want to check.
Hi everyone, if you've just joined us, we're going to wait until we've got the number of people that we're expecting. So we'll just be a few minutes, but bear with us, and then we'll introduce. Thank you for joining us. We'll give it another minute. I'm very impatient, by the way.
Hopefully a bit more patient with the questions, Una.
Sorry?
Hopefully you're more patient with your questioning.
I'll start to realise just how difficult it is for people who do this. Anyone saw, did you see Andrew Kelly last night with Marvin? Yeah, he's so good. The questioning was really good. Don't expect that, everyone, okay, this morning. I think we might kick off. It's a couple of minutes now in. So welcome everyone who's joined us, wherever you are. One of the benefits of this is that maybe you're joining us from even further afield than Bristol. So I'm going to introduce everybody. I'm Una Goldsworthy. I'm Chief Executive of Brunel Care, but at the time of the Launchpad project, I was at United Communities who were behind the project. So I've come along today. I'm going to give you a bit of an introduction, and then we're going to have some questions for all the panel. So if we go around, Nigel, can you introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nigel Dyke. I'm Director of Alec French Architects based in Bristol, and we were the architects supporting United Communities, University of Bristol and Independent Living on this particular project.
Thank you. Zoe.
Hi everyone, my name is Zoe Wilcox. My job title is Director of Development of Place. I'm responsible for the Planning Authority at Bristol City Council.
Thank you, Zoe. Ben.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ben Pilling, Acting Chief Executive at University of Bristol Students' Union. And our role in the project was really to lead on the student side of the community, and looking forward to talking.
Thank you. Jamie.
Morning, I'm Jamie Gill. I'm the Partnerships Director at 1625 Independent People, and we provide a whole range of accommodation and support for young people at homeless and young people leaving care. And I was involved with Una and Ben and the rest of the team in developing the project.
Thanks, and finally, James.
Hi, morning everyone. I'm James Howard. I'm Development Director at Studio Hive. We're Bristol-based developer plus consultant. We acted and work very closely with United Communities in the role as EA and cost advisor, but general project advisor as well.
Thank you, everybody. And there were many more behind this, but we wouldn't have been able to fill all your screens. So this is just some of the team. United Communities, Sally Gilbert is a development manager there, would have joined us today, but unfortunately hasn't been able to. So I'll try and fill in on some of that. Just to kick us off, I'm going to do a bit of an intro for those of you who don't know so much about the project. And to start us off, I'm going to show you a photo. So you've got an internal shot and some of the externals. It's Launchpad is in Fishponds. It's on Alexandra Place. You can go and have a look. It's still looking pretty good a year on, and it's almost exactly a year since we completed it. So now the residents who live there have been there for a year now, and we're going to talk about some of their experiences too. So thank you for that. If we go back to the main panel, just by way of introduction, and then I'm going to ask others to say how they got involved. Launchpad as a concept came about because in 2017, I was really privileged to get a Churchill Fellowship. And I applied for the fellowship wanting to look at particular issues about our housing solutions for millennials. And that came from a realization of talking to some of the people on the call today, but also the fact that I had 4 millennials of my own in my family, and their friends and friendship groups, all really, really struggling to get somewhere to live. Basically, they were facing a lifetime probably of renting and often known as generation rent. And the sort of housing solutions that we were coming up with, which were social housing or housing for sale, weren't accessible to them. That was one thing, but also they just took too long. You know, a 5-year development program timetable is not that unusual by the time you've got planning and sites and blah, blah, everything else. So it was just all taking too long. So what I wanted to do is to go and look across at what was happening in Europe. And so I visited Germany and Holland, and also what was happening in Australia as well. So, and other parts of the UK. So I spent a lot of time traveling around, talking to people, interviewing young people, going to visit projects. And what I came back with was what I think then became Launchpad, which I like to say is a bit of a fusion project. So it brought together lots of those different ideas and experiences and concepts that I discovered throughout my travels. Launchpad, just in summary, so what is Launchpad? Launchpad is 33 modular homes. They're studios. The project that we are talking about today was conceived for young people, but looking at young people not just living in the traditional locations in terms of student housing or young people leaving care or supported housing or key worker housing. And we thought, let's bring it all together. Let's not separate people, because in the real world, people live in communities, not separated into different types of housing. So we wanted to try and look at how we brought that all together. It was conceived and delivered in about 18 months from start to finish. So what I said then about the 5-year normal development program, we cut that massively short. We did that because of the modular construction, which we'll talk about in a minute. And we also did it really quickly because the other concept, which was really, really critical, is to use sites that are short-term sites, so on short-term leases. Because if we tried to do this on land for sale, A, it wouldn't have been affordable, and B, it would have taken just too long to go through all the legal channels. So we were looking particularly at using land that was surplus to use at the moment, and we focused on car parks, being car parks that were underused in locations that weren't sort of central. And that's how we approached it. So the reason you've got all of us today talking to you is because it very much was a partnership project. And so, but the introductions that you've just heard were absolutely critical. This wasn't a project that was conceived within one organisation. It was very much co-produced amongst different organisations and different groups with a range of different partners. So if we hadn't had that, I don't think we'd have had the creativity and perhaps the bravery to go ahead and do what we did. The other thing before I go and start asking questions is what was really important to us is it could be replicated. Innovation, one-off pilot projects, great, fantastic, but actually none of us had the energy to just do that. It was really important whatever we did could be done again and that we could use that learning, and we're going to talk a bit about that now. So I hope that's given you a bit of a summary. There is also on the Bristol Housing Festival website an evaluation report, and so that goes into a lot more detail, and that's available, I think, had been emailed around anyway or put on the website. Have a look at that if you want some of those detailed questions that we might not have time to cover this morning, but that goes into a lot of the technical stuff as well. So thank you. So I'm going to kick off with asking Jamie to cast himself back to a very hot, sunny day in Amsterdam and explain what you were doing there. Why were you there?
I was in Amsterdam because Una, as you know, invited a group of people to visit some of the projects in Amsterdam that were trying to tackle the challenges of housing young people in new and different ways. And we wanted to, as a group, there was Una was there, our chair, who was then Director of Housing, Nick Hooper, was there, and a number of others. And we looked at two groups of project. One was called Start Block, And that's the project that really inspired me and inspired us to take Launchpad forwards. We also looked at a number of intergenerational projects which were equally inspiring, and I which hope one day will be projects that inspire new work in Bristol. The Start Block project housed over 500 young people together. It housed about half of the young people were young refugees with status in Amsterdam, in Holland, and half of the young people were students. And what the visit did to me that sunny day was provide an opportunity to meet some of the young refugees and students and just be inspired by how well they integrated together in such large numbers, how well they managed the project. So it was based on a self-management model where rather than a housing association or support provider providing support, it was very much about equipping and enabling young people to work together to manage the project. And that was reflected in how well the young people were integrated, but also how well the estate was managed and how well looked after it was. And it was also, as Una's mentioned in relation to Launchpad, using modular construction, and it was making use of meanwhile sites. And that inspiration we brought back to Bristol. And Una, within a week, I think, had established a meeting with Ben Pilling from the Student Union and began making contacts at the university and in City Hall and Alec French Architects and others. And very soon after getting back to Amsterdam, the inspiration began to turn into the formative ideas of Launchpad. And I think that drive and determination to make things happen from Una is what really helped. And another really important factor was the fact that I think that we all really enjoyed working together to make it a reality. And that really carried us through a whole heap of challenges, as you can imagine. It was inspiring for us as a charity and for me personally, because it really sought to challenge the segregation of young people in Bristol and to think differently about how young people are housed and to be willing to take a risk. At 1625, certainly we wondered how it would work with, certainly we tempered down the numbers from 500 in Amsterdam. We decided to work with 30 to 40 on the first project. But also we thought about the mix of young people, and we wanted a really diverse mix. So we focused on students, young people that had been homeless or in care, but were now ready to move on from supported housing, and young people that were public sector key workers. And that mix is what Launchpad is now. And it really helps to show, I think, the city that it can work to help young people to support themselves rather than be supported by organisations, and to that we don't have to house young people separately. We must bring communities together. And that was the inspiration that Una brought for us from Amsterdam that we brought back.
Thanks, Jamie. But I think the fact that we experienced it together and saw it together meant that we could therefore visualise what it might look like. And it was about trying to bring lots of different ideas together, wasn't it? And if we'd just been one person seeing that and trying to communicate, I think it just helped having that inspiration and sharing that.
I think that's right. And also actually meeting the people involved and seeing the project itself. Without having been, I think we were really inspired by that personal contact with the young project and by seeing the project, and then being able to bring back the determination to make it succeed, the belief that it could succeed.
Thanks, Jamie. I think you just mentioned about coming to talk to Ben. And I think, Ben, I was introduced to you by Robert Curse, who is the finance director at the university. And that's another thing, isn't it? Because we don't often interact in terms of the housing world or the building world and the university world. So that introduction, what did you think when we first came to talk to you?
Well, actually, what I was just reflecting on was that I'm certain that at that first meeting, it was implied that there would be a sunny trip to Amsterdam for me at some stage during this project, and it hasn't happened yet. So I'm putting a marker down that 2-year review. I think we still need that Amsterdam visit, or at least I do. But no, you're absolutely right. I think the connection through Robert, who's Chief Operating Officer at University of Bristol, was really important. He brought his experience from a housing background to the project and has supported it all the way through. And he helped us make the connection with you just at a point that we were kind of looking for our next step on our kind of journey around housing. So our journey around housing had started about six or 7 years ago, when we'd kind of identified that there was this real gap in the market for an ethical student lettings agency, that students were experiencing a poor deal in the private rented sector, and we wanted to influence that. So I'd led the launch of Bristol SU Lettings, which is still a part of this project, and actually it's the team in SU Lettings that really drive the student side of it, so I'll just say thank you to them. We'd had that running for a couple of years, and we were really looking for kind of what was our next step in terms of housing, and we wanted to do something more meaningful, and that we had kind of greater control over. And actually, what we were interested in, it was myself and a student officer at the time, Stephen Lafanu, who now works in housing and kind of regional development. We're looking at the concept of student-owned housing, student cooperatives, and also this concept of mixed communities, which was really kind of gathering interest at the time. And we were looking at ideas that we'd seen in Spain for intergenerational living, so students and older people living together, and some examples that we hadn't seen, but we'd heard of from Scandinavia of students and ex-offenders living together. And we were just kind of really excited by it, but didn't really know where to go with it. So Robert kind of made this introduction, and it just felt it felt really serendipitous and fortuitous. We were in that place that we were interested, and I just remember being really excited at that first meeting, as you were talking about the Amsterdam project, and kind of exciting to meet you and get a sense that actually there was suddenly a kind of a partnership and a potential vehicle for this.
Can you talk us through a little bit about how we had to learn about the student world being quite different, and particularly around timescales? That was a really big issue for us, wasn't it, about the academic terms and so on?
Yeah, yes, it was. So I think there was learning on both sides. I think we all had a real instinct that the model could work. So as soon as I met Jamie and we started talking about 16 to 25, which actually we'd already worked with as an organisation in a different capacity, I had this kind of really strong gut instinct that this model of mixed community could really work. But as you say, there was also a lot of learning to do. And the first couple of things we tried to do was to set up focus groups of young people from 16 to 25 and young students. We brought them together, and we kind of started to talk to them about what would a mixed community mean to them, what would be important in a mixed community, what would the kind of housing need to look and feel like for it to kind of create that sort of aspirational community we were aiming for. But it was actually, I think what you're referring to is that as we started to work into real timelines, I think I mentioned that actually there was only about 2 points in the year where you can really let to students. They either arrive in July or October, and if you miss that, you've missed it for a whole year. And I think at one stage we thought we had missed it for that first year, and actually somehow Una was able to, I'm sure you'll come on to this, but was able to drive us through, and Nigel drive us through planning and construction from what felt like kind of January to September in one single year, and we hit that point that we could take on a group of students. And whilst we're on that, I suppose the other thing I would just reflect on is we spent a lot of time talking about the fact that there's 30,000 students at Bristol, and amongst that group there's a huge variety, and we decided we would target this project at students that had a real interest in community and kind of community living, students that wanted to live in Bristol year round, so not just for 8 months of the year, probably postgraduate and potentially mature students. And actually at one stage we talked about families as well, but in the end we didn't, the accommodation didn't suit families. And we had conversations with Jamie as well about how best to help that community to flourish by choosing the right sorts of kind of demographics from each of them.
Thanks, Ben. I think coming on to Nigel, which we might come on to that issue about the reality of what it means if you've got to open a date. Actually, it's no good just saying a date, you've got to work back from there. That was one issue. But I think when I first approached you, just first thoughts were. And I think it was on the concept of you'd already worked on Wapping Wharf project in the centre of Bristol, which we all love as Bristolians, and was very innovative. So yeah, what were your first thoughts, and how do you tell it to the rest of your team? Because I think I asked you to do it for a very little amount of money.
I think it's called one of those corporate social responsibility projects, isn't it? And also doubles up as being a practice that's very proud of its roots and its reputation in Bristol as a city. So it ticked a number of boxes on those sort of fronts, shall we say? But yeah, no, this wasn't a project to retire on in any way, not in terms of financial gain, and certainly in that way. But I mean, I think the thing about it that was instantly appealing was that construction as an industry, as a general statement, is notoriously conservative because of the risks involved, the financial or whatever they might be. And so here was a project that was trying to break that innovative model, or being innovative, shall we say, and break that model by trying something different, which is by the nature of the industry quite difficult to do, but actually also addressing a real problem in the city. I think that was the combination of being possible to be involved in an innovative project and actually solving a real problem quickly was very seductive and very appealing, and so we were delighted to be involved in that way and build, as you say, on our knowledge of cargo. I mean, I'm sure James will touch on it later, but modern methods of construction have been around a long time, but I think this feeling is that this time they're here to stay for lots of reasons. And so building on the knowledge of cargo and other projects like that into a Launchpad was definitely something that was a positive in that way.
Did you tell us a little bit about that journey between us coming back from Amsterdam and telling you we wanted shipping containers to what we actually ended up with, which was not shipping containers at all?
I mean, I think the thing about shipping containers was we all felt that certainly for this particular project, it had to look different in some way from a more conventional project. So shipping containers was an obvious sort of appearance or style in a way, in that it was immediate, it was potentially quick, and all of those sorts of things. But it actually turned out quite quickly that just taking a bunch of second-hand shipping containers, which Umberslade will hate me for saying it, is basically what cargo is, doesn't work for residential, really, because the standard modules are too small, both in width and in height, by the time you put floors and ceilings and all of those things in. So actually, what we had to do very quickly as a team, and it's a constant theme through this conversation about not being afraid to just keep moving and try things and learn lessons and make mistakes, is we very quickly had to work out how we could make our own shipping containers that were the right size. And that's where the actual supplier that we eventually ended up with is almost as important a member of this team as the panel here, in that they were also sort of up for the project in a way, and I'm sure if they were here, they would say about all the things they've learned and the benefits they've had from being part of the Launchpad project. So we basically made bespoke shipping containers in the end, which was interesting, if only because it was in Hull.
Yeah. Lots of journeys up to Hull, which were a particular highlight of the whole thing. Coming to you, Zoe. Now, Zoe won't know this. Zoe, as head of planning, is quite scary to all of us. She's not really, but she is somebody that planning is really important. And we knew that what we were trying to do wasn't conventional and didn't conform to all the planning rules. So I think Nigel and I went to meet Zoe in City Hall. I can remember it even to this day, actually. Tell us what your reaction was, Zoe, because what we were asking for was very definitely not mainstream.
Yes, okay. It was back in February 18. I had to look back because I didn't realise how long ago it had been. And just to say, we offer things called Inception Meetings, which are not actually pre-application. They're just really an opportunity to come in and share some early thinking. And we encourage it because obviously if we're involved early, we understand and we can start working more collaboratively than if something's all been worked through, finalised, and then we're just being asked to respond. So I was very welcoming of Nigel and Una coming and just sharing where they'd got so far. And whilst it was innovative and different, it did hit some of those key buttons, really. As Nigel said, affordable housing and dealing with housing for vulnerable people. The fact that it was looking at different methods of construction. I'd been involved very much with the Wapping Wharf with Stuart Hatton and Umber Slade, and the success that had been for Bristol. So I was much more receptive than possibly if that scheme hadn't happened. But also my initial reaction was, should people really be living in shipping containers? We're all about quality, not just numbers in the city. And I think that was my initial nervousness about, are we just dumbing, because the needs are great, will we ended up produce a product that isn't acceptable? And we were working on early stages of doing something we call an urban living supplementary planning document, which was all about driving up, optimizing density, but only on the basis that we create good quality places to live. And that's in terms of space standards, height, outlook, lighting and everything. So all those things were playing through. But for me, one of the key things is that United Communities, who'd got to have a really good track record in the city of meeting affordable housing needs, managing affordable housing accommodation, in a way gave you the confidence that if we're going to try something innovative, United Communities would be an organisation that we really needed to help do that. Combined, of course, with this concept of students, because the student issue is significant in the city. We've not got enough student accommodation. We do need to look at better models of providing student accommodation. We've had some quite challenging schemes come forward for student accommodation in terms of quantity and quality. So anything that started looking at a different way, a different model, again, so that it played into a number of agendas that were really important to the city. But you're right, it was an early first meeting. The other thing I'd say is location, because often people have good ideas. The hardest thing in the city is to find the right site. That's often the hardest thing. The ideas we're not short of, finding the right site is often the challenge. The fact that this was an underused car park, we didn't charge for it, so there was no sort of loss of income for the council. And the idea of making better use of underused brownfield land was also a tick. The fact it was council controlled, so we could be very much part of the project. We had an interest, it's our land. So in terms of negotiating the lease, so all those factors made me feel as the planning authority that we would have confidence in however it developed, we wouldn't have issues moving forward with the type of housing being created. So I'll stop there, Una, but I'm sure there's other things we can pick up.
Yeah, and I think particularly, and some people who've dialed in today may have concerns about the size, and that was something we definitely discussed with you, wasn't it? Because I think there was a concern that we didn't want to be part of the race to the bottom in terms of setting a precedent that meant we could provide smaller and smaller accommodation. And we were very mindful that wasn't what we wanted to do. We didn't want to set that sort of regime that you would then find difficult to defend. So there were things within the scheme that we had to do, if you wanted to mention.
Yes, so one of the ways we worked around that as well is the idea that whilst they are self-contained units, the amount of shared accommodation meant that it was really seen as, planning language, a sui generis use. They're not classed as C3 individual units. The whole development is the accommodation. And whilst people have self-contained units, the fact that there's a lot of shared facilities means that we didn't then apply the exact space standards per flatted unit, because we assessed the whole thing. And because it's student development, that also meant that we weren't setting a precedent for new build self-contained units for sale, for example. And that was important, of making sure that we were flexible as we could be, that the product met the needs of the occupiers without setting that precedent for all development moving forward. So that was something that we did work through. And the fact that there is shared facilities is part of what the offer is anyway, the idea that it is a community of people that spend time together as well as having their own accommodation. So that helped on that issue in terms of how we strictly applied the space standards. But also as well, that move away from the shipping containers, as Nigel was explaining, also helped, because obviously it meant you could go for better height and better dimensions. So also that direction of travel also meant that it wasn't such an issue as potentially at the beginning I had a concern it might be.
Una, is it worth just pointing out that also that the residents here aren't living there for forever. You know, that there is a finite period. I think it's 3 years, and it is the maximum tenancy.
You're right, Nigel. It's 2 years. I mean, that was another factor that came in. The idea is this isn't permanent forever homes. This is a step. 2 years. It links in with the students, of course, because they're not here permanently, and likewise the idea for the young people is it is a home for them, but it's not a long-term home, and therefore the 2-year tenancy was in recognition of it is quite tight accommodation, and should you partner up with anybody or life moves on for you, they wouldn't be the right type of accommodation. So the 2-year, along with the other planning condition, just to say, was the fact that it is a 10-year development as well, again in recognition that it isn't permanent, it is for a period of time on this.
So all things, if anyone's watching in and wants to look at how they replicate, are all things that we can share, and that's part of the Housing Festival approach, that we share this information. We don't keep it just to ourselves. Having sort of set the scene for that, then, in terms of we've got the architects, we've got the planning approach, we've got the occupancy sorted, then the expectation is it just happens. And I just want to introduce James. James came along with Studio Hive to actually knock it into shape in terms of a project delivery. And James, do you want to come in and just say some of the things perhaps you had to make sure that we took account of to make sure it actually did hit the timescale that we wanted to work on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, just sort of go over the reason why we're involved. I mean, we worked collaboratively with UC anyway. We were already looking at sort of MMC as a solution to the industry's problems, which we're all aware of. So we were delighted to get involved and also, use this as part of our CSR. But in terms of, sort of issues that we had to face, cost was a big issue. We had to, as we said, we looked at shipping containers. On the face of it, they appeared a sort of solution from a cost point of view, but didn't fit the bill from a design point of view. So we did a lot of research into the type of accommodation that could be out there, the type of MMC suppliers. And this was part of our sort of R&D phase, as we like to call it, Una, as you know. And that was about 6 months of just testing the market, working out the brief, making sure what we wanted was deliverable. And I think that was quite a sort of challenge, and it took 6 months. And I think anyone listening, it's really worthwhile spending all that time up front to really know what's out in the market. The market's very different now, and there's quite a few more suppliers coming on stream. At the time, it was reasonably limited in terms of those who could actually deliver what we wanted. I suppose the other issues were program and managing to sort of achieve the program that we were talking about. I mean, just to give an overview of the program, we had broadly 6 months of sort of talking to Zoe and Nigel and sort of hypothesizing what this is actually going to look like. Then from September, we really sort of made the firm commitment, September 18. And then from that point, it was 12 months to actually handing over the units and people moving in. But that program was incredibly tight. We had to get planning, we had to commit funding, or Una had to commit funding. We had to sort of come up with a concept, we had to commit to the supplier. And the one sort of thing which I think in terms of knocking it in shape, which we've sort of learned a lot about this, is actually the more and more you can do up front, the better it is, because it sort of makes that program tighter. It makes everything more definitive. And I think looking back on this, because it was a pilot project, it was a bit loose at the time. But now, if we did another one, we'd be very clear as to what we wanted, in terms of approaching the planning side, approaching the delivery, the architecture side, we'd be very clear. And that's a sort of positive thing that came out of it. Contractual issues were an interesting one. And this sort of touches on VAT. But really, the industry is not sort of geared up for MMC projects yet. So we had to work up our own bespoke contract to deal with things like sort of all the upfront expenditure you have to commit to secure the factory slot, to secure the design ahead of wanting to commit sort of full funds to actually production factory. So those things you have to sort of factor into the program, but there are also delivery aspects that you need to be aware of. And then of course there's the site enabling works, which was a challenge. Ideally, we'd have liked to include those into one package under one JCT contract, but there are cost and timing issues that need to be thought out. We actually ended up doing it separately, which worked out okay, but it needs to be thought about a hell of a lot up front in terms of what the finished unit is and how that corresponds with actually what needs to be done on site. So there was a lot of things like that. Yeah, I think I've probably talked quite a bit there. I think I've covered some of the issues, so I might have missed some, but we'll come back to that.
I think some of the rigour was that in a traditional building programme, you might have a project meeting once a month or a site meeting, and
yes,
looking at that. Because of the speed of what we were trying to do, everything had to be brought together, didn't it? So we were meeting weekly, and then towards the end, daily, actually. And it was a precursor of what we're all doing now automatically, because we weren't doing this then, were we? But we were actually doing some of this work then because we just had to in order to move it on.
And I think that's a good point. I mean, I think like any project, communication is absolutely key. And I think what we were really good at as a team is meeting weekly, working out where the things are that were causing an issue and dealing with those, and then having in our minds the next sort of issue that's coming around the corner. So we were knocking things off as we went along, and it worked really well. As you say, ordinarily we sort of have monthly project meetings, but I think that's one of the things that maybe needs to change with MMC. We need to think about that sort of traditional way a bit differently, because they are so fast. You know, a lot can happen in a month, basically, on a project like this. And you need to have that regular contact as we did, which actually worked out quite well.
Do you think, I think all those things are often things that you discover because you don't know what you don't know. And so there's a lot of those conversations, we didn't know what we didn't know until we knew them. And then we had to unpick it. But one of the things to bring in Nigel back in is how we aligned a very conventional building industry, for example, building regs, fire regulations, the statutory services, to align to work in a different pace.
Yeah, I actually think that this project probably wouldn't have been delivered in quite this way if there'd been more time. And I think the program and the pressure on the program absolutely drove both the fact that we needed to solve problems and not stand still and just keep moving, but also a really sort of collaborative approach with everyone we came into contact with. I think building control and planning, I think, was fine, in that we clearly, with Zoe's sort of leadership, we had a planning team at the council who were committed and focused on this project, and that was incredibly helpful for lots of reasons. But also in terms of building control was being able to almost teach them about what we were doing, because it was very new, and it did take a couple of meetings to get the Bristol City Council building control officers to understand that the normal processes just couldn't work here, whether that's 6 weeks to get a decision on a building control application or whatever it might be. That would have sunk us. And so I think the program driving solution making and all of that across whatever you want to talk about, whether it's contract, whether it's planning, or whether it's public engagement, was absolutely fundamental to the success of the project in a way. I'm sure if we'd had 2.5 years, we'd have got there in the end, but I don't think we needed it. See what I mean?
But it did mean we had to pull lots of levers, didn't it? I think along the way. Yeah. Sure, it was very much, we were glad we hadn't filmed it. I think all of us agreed at the end. But all those levers about getting the water in, the electric, all those different, which everybody worked on such a different time frame to the one that we needed in order to meet Ben's need to get the students in by September, and that date couldn't change. You know, there wasn't anything that we could have much influence on.
I suspect we've all burnt some credit.
Yeah, haven't done another one
across the city.
We haven't talked about the people, and this is where we started with. The most important thing was about trying to create a new community. So I wanted to bring Ben and Jamie in to say, year on, how's it gone? Now, it's been COVID, you know, for half of the time that those young people have been living there. So that will have a massive impact. But tell us a little bit about what it's been like in the first year.
Well, firstly, just to say, for the young people that came either through, had previously been homeless or previously been in care, they've all succeeded. They've all sustained their tenancies, and 2 of them are moving on. 1 of them's moving on into university. And so with great outcomes in terms of the young people's stability and progress. The young people, again, from 1625, they've really engaged in alongside the students and key workers. So the young people haven't drifted into their own backgrounds. They've really mixed in terms of their involvement, both in managing the project, but also in terms of the social aspects, whether it's, you know, joining WhatsApp groups to organise social activities, getting involved in board games, getting involved in running. We've had university students supporting our young people with UCAS applications and college applications. So the integration has worked really well. The outcomes have been fantastic. And of course, and the involvement in activities was, of course, going very well until COVID came. But if I think in terms of the resilience of young people getting through COVID, it really spurred the fact that they were part of a community has been so important. And a WhatsApp group formed very quickly to support each other, both emotionally and practically, in terms of getting shopping for people and all these practical things that we know happen in communities across Bristol. And that's been a fantastic outcome, is that having that community there has helped young people through the challenges of COVID. We had, I think, Ben will know better, but I think about 6 young students probably left the accommodation early because of COVID. And in spite of that challenge to the community, it's progressed and it's going positively. So things are going very well, and it's been life-changing for some of those young people that are now moving on. And they talk how Launchpad has been, that, you know, made that change possible in their lives. It's gone really well, and all of my hopes for the young people would be that would be when they leave 1625, when they leave the support that we have to offer, and for some young people a sense of family, that they can progress in the city to build their own healthy relationships, trusted relationships and positive relationships. And that's been achieved, and that's what we wanted from Launchpad, was really good quality housing, a different way of housing young people, but most importantly, positive relationships that have been formed, and that has really shone through in the relationships across all of the young people, the positive relationships that are formed. And the young people also have really fed back about the quality of the housing and how much they appreciate it. And the need for both affordable and high quality housing isn't something that just our young people at 1625 need. It's true for students and all young people in the city. So the quality of the housing has been absolutely key to its success as well, I think, in terms of people really value and are proud of where they're living.
Thanks, Jamie. And Ben, from the students' perspective, I know some haven't been able to stay the whole year, and there's a new cohort, I guess, moving in now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we're full again now. I was echo everything Jamie's just said, and the feedback we've had is fantastic. And I was just going to draw on a couple of other things that I think kind of stuck out to me. One was affordability. So one of our prime drivers was to deliver affordable student accommodation, and that we get really positive feedback about the levels at which we've been able to set the rent, and the rent is more or less set at the same level for every tenant in the community, which is fantastic. In order to achieve that affordability, the project asks the residents to take on some of the sort of maintenance, upkeep, kind of community responsibilities. And I think that's been really important in terms of building the community and achieving the affordability. And as you know, it's kind of prompted interesting conversations along the way. And I was kind of reflecting on those days when we were literally moving people in as the builders were really still sort of finishing. And we gave the community of residents the funds to sort the community space in the project themselves, which I think was also a really important move in year one. One of the concerns for us had been about location, just in the sense that it's off the normal kind of student beaten track, and actually that hasn't proved to be an issue at all. In fact, it's worked really well. And I was just going to ask Jamie a couple of things really to see what he thought. One was sort of halfway through the project, we decided to add young key workers in as a kind of to blend the community further, and that hadn't been something we'd started with. And I guess I was interested on your thoughts on how that had worked. And the second thing was that also quite late on, you were able to source funding to provide a key worker to the community, someone who can check in a couple of times a week and try to foster that kind of community spirit. And that also to me seemed really important, and a kind of a key contributing factor to its success.
Definitely. I mean, we were very lucky that Nationwide Building Society supported the project by funding a community development worker, which I think we all knew was absolutely key to establishing a model of self-management and structure to managing the project, as well as developing the social activities and thinking about replication in the project going forwards. We really needed that. Ria's the fantastic worker that supports the young people to support themselves and to manage the project. And it's been a really interesting journey because the project actually sits within our participation team rather than our housing team, because what it draws on is the real belief that only by enabling young people to take control of their own lives can they, one, really succeed in life, and two, can we really get it right as a charity. So we've been very lucky to have that investment in the community development worker. I think the mix was the right mix in the sense that it really made sense to bring students, key workers, and 1625 young people together. The stability of the sustainment, the most sustainment of tenancies has actually been from 1625 young people, which I'm so pleased with, because I think stability is such an important factor in changing lives for young people that have faced so much instability in their lives before coming to us. So that's really pleasing. I think that we could think differently about the mix, but we were cautious as well about getting a broad range of young people into the project. And I think we could rethink it. I certainly wouldn't be averse to looking at a project with students and 1625 young people next time. I think it's also gone well with the key workers, but there has been more turnaround for a number of reasons that has happened, but not massively. Not to the point that it's an issue at all.
Thank you. We've got some questions in the chat box, which I'm going to try and find now. And then we'll finish off by asking about what's going to happen next. First question is from Ellen Grist. Has anyone been approached by other organisations, partnerships in the city that are actively exploring other mixed community housing developments off the back of this project, or elsewhere in the country? Zoe, have you had any approaches from others?
I think only under the banner of the Housing Festival. We've had, various, but not so much a project like this, more the approach to construction and development, the increasing interest in MMC and off-site manufacture and such. There's been definitely a take-up of that. But I'm not aware of any other mixed projects in terms of the mix of young people and students. I've not been approached about that. I mean, I'm keen that we do more of it in Bristol, because I think it's a really good approach to student housing, and I think it's a better product for all the reasons that Ben was saying. Really, it's just how you scale it up.
I'd echo that, and I'll just quickly say I've been approached by a number of other universities who are interested in this sort of project. So universities from different cities in the UK.
And I had a query from the cabinet member in Ipswich about not on a number of aspects, and so there's definitely interest there outside of the city as well as within. definitely, you know, keen to see the model grow and develop.
Yeah, and anyone who's interested in it, get in touch with the Bristol Housing Festival, and they can, you know, we can share our learning with you, whether it's standard documents, whatever else we had. There's no point everybody else reinventing the wheel on that. There's a comment in the chat box about the Launchpad homes being much bigger. Yes, that was one of our than the room that she had at university. And yes, that's true. Our aspiration was looking at what was done in Amsterdam at Start Block. We wanted to mirror the same. So I think we're at 23 square meters. Was
just over
23 square meters, which is bigger. And that was something that we were definitely aiming for, as big as we could afford to do. Next question for Nicola again is about are any of us involved in any similar projects? So I suppose that's the first question. We've probably answered that one. And then from Jeremy, from Jez, recognising finding the right site is a challenge. Is there hope to repeat this kind of project in Bristol? Again, about interest from other cities. Yes, so we've had that interest from other cities. In terms of finding other sites, it sounds very easy to say we just want an ex-car park site, or we had a number of sites, Nigel, didn't we, that we looked at? Do you want to come in there and talk about?
Yeah, I mean, we looked at 2 other council car parks, which for various reasons, I mean, one was certainly a possibility, but in terms of timescales and the scale of project, it was felt that Alexandra Park was less of a planning risk in a sense. And we also looked at a site within the university on Park Street. So you know, in a way, the idea of the model is that it could be on any suitable site. So you know, it's very quick and very easy to sense whether the project will work, whether you get enough scale and all of those sorts of things on site. I mean, we're actually looking at a project very similar to this for South Gloucestershire now, where they obviously have similar problems in terms of homelessness and whatever. So there are, you know, that it is a replicable project, and that was the idea. So you know, it is designed that you can take it apart and move it.
Yeah. We've you know, we've looked at a similar project down in Torbay as well. In fact, with Nigel, where it was not dissimilar to the ZPod scheme that's now on site, whereby we created a platform over a public car park and then put the same sort of construction units on top. And that's at business plan stage, but the business plan seems to stack up. And I think it's just a question of probably getting through this current period we're in to then sort of start to move it forward. But yeah, so we found there's a bit of interest from other local authorities, as Nigel has, and others, and I think it's you know, it's a good solution to those sorts of sites which are underutilized, quite frankly. So yeah.
Thank you. Next question I seem to have lost. I don't know what I'm doing. There's a question from Billy about could we comment on the key changes would need to be in terms of construction industry change and land and finance. To be honest, Billy, I think that's like we'd have to run the whole thing again, because that's a big question. I'd point you in the direction of the evaluation report. It covers a lot of those things. We haven't this morning, for example, talked about land finance and funding, but some of that is in that report, so I won't dwell on it now. There's also a question from Nitin Bashin about, will there be a formal post-occupancy evaluation? When and where can we expect to see that? Jamie, do you want to talk about that?
Well, we're keen to work with Bristol Housing Festival on evaluation going forwards is one answer. And also keen to work with the university if that's possible. So we're exploring options, but we weren't in the time frame able to build in the evaluation from day one. But we're keen and welcome any approaches around evaluation and post-occupancy evaluation, and keen to work with Bristol Housing Festival on that.
So I think there's been evaluation already, and actually from United Community, if they were on the call now, they'd say that they also do they're doing evaluation as well. So yes, we'll share that when it's done. From Stephen Dale, yeah, of course, Stephen. To share, I should have said that actually. The Bristol Community Land Trust has a community hub now that they manage, and they're very happy to share lots of ideas that are coming up. I mean, one thing we do know about Bristol is it's not short of ideas, and it's not short of that community energy, is it? So please Google Bristol Community Land Trust. You'll find them a website, and you'll find the link then to the community hub. Please do that. Another question about, I think that's just a comment, isn't it, about working with a group of young professionals. Again, get in touch if you want to know some of the learning that some of the things that went wrong for us. It didn't all go right, by the way. There was a lot of last minute getting people in with a programme that was quite stressed towards the end.
There was a point at the end of that one, I think, about shared ownership. I think one of the things we've learned recently is that it's really important to get accreditations that are mortgageable if you're looking at that sort of tenure, particularly if you're going down the private housing tenure. So it's just something to be mindful of, that you need to make sure your MMC supplier has relevant accreditations.
Yeah, and that was a particular issue because of trying to raise the finance for the project. Because it's a 10-year project, 10-year lease, we couldn't get conventional finance. That was a big issue. I think it's changing now, but it's trying to persuade funders that they will lend on a temporary building is very difficult.
I mean, the other thing that was quite interesting about the 10-year lease is, obviously, we tried to make this project as low energy as possible, and the fact that you're only around for 10 years has some huge implications on the payback periods of things like photovoltaics and air source heat pumps and all of those sorts of things, and that was quite a challenge. And we did lean heavily on a services engineer who gave their time for free as part of Land Aid, to come up with some modelling to prove that actually we could get the payback for the photovoltaics within 7.5 years, which just about made it worthwhile putting them on, as well as having to comply, obviously, with planning policy. So the 10-year lease threw up a number of challenges throughout the whole project on various levels: finance, buildability, sustainability, all of those sorts of things.
There's other questions which I'm sorry we're not going to be able to get around to now. We've only got 3 minutes left, and I just want to sum up. Any of the questions that you've put in the box, we'll capture those, and we'll come back to you with some responses. So I just want to finish off. We've got about 3 minutes left, to the panel. Would you do it again? Maybe we'll just have a thumbs up for that, or a thumbs down. Would we do it again? And we talked a little bit about future plans. And I do know if United Communities are on the call, there definitely are Launchpad 2s in the Launchpad 2 is in the offing. And hopefully this time, some of that learning that we learned from our first Launchpad will make the next process much more streamlined, we hope. Just to finish off very, very quickly, we were talking about whether Launchpad would happen if we were trying to do it on Zoom calls. And anybody want to comment on that? If we were trying to build the relationships that we built in order to make it happen, how would that work?
I think Launchpad 2 would work, because we've done Launchpad 1, if you see what I mean. So we've been through the fire on that one. I think the personal relationships have been fantastically important. And we probably all know in our heart of hearts that somehow as a group, we over-committed to making it work, regardless of what was being thrown at us.
I would just echo, I think the personal relationships were really important, and the project generated a huge amount of goodwill from a really broad range of stakeholders. There were partners that aren't even on this call who were really important to this project, and I think it was. I think it wouldn't have. I think it would have struggled in a Zoom only world to really generate that kind of buy-in that got everybody to put 120, 130% into to make it happen.
Yeah,
that's a lesson about. We were talking about how we manage our lives now. What's missing is often hard to grab, isn't it, or to actually understand. But some of that is about the relationships and how we build those. And that's what it was all about. So thank you, everybody. I think we finish in about a minute's time. Sorry we didn't get around to answering all your questions, but we will come back on those. Please enjoy the rest of the festival. Lots of events going on over the next week or so. Thanks for coming in and listening to us. I hope it's been helpful to you. And I guess the passing thing is, if you've got an idea and it seems mad, just go for it. Thank you.